Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to Real Talk, Real Deals, stories and tips from the real world of sales. This is a podcast where we're talking about how to be successful in selling. I'm your host, Andrea Grodnitzky, and in this episode, we're going to talk about being an agile sales leader and what it really takes to lead sales teams today. Our guest today is Calvin Strachan, one of Richardson's exceptional field sales coaches. For over 14 years, Calvin's been helping high achievers perform their best under pressure. Speaking of pressure, Calvin has a lot of experience with that as a leader in several multi-million-dollar sales organizations, ranging from direct sales, pharmaceutical sales, personal development, you name it, Calvin's done it. So I'm very thrilled to welcome Calvin to the podcast today. Calvin, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Andrea. Good to be here. Looking forward to it.
Happy to have you. This is such an interesting topic. And I know you work with sales professionals, but also sales managers, sales leaders. So we're thrilled to have you on today. And let's get right into it. You know, the modern sales organization, I know you know this, Calvin, requires a sales leader that is, I guess dynamic is the word, right? A sales pursuit, it can be very dynamic, and you really need a sales leader that's dynamic as well in today's climate. And, Richardson believes that really requires agility. And I'm curious about your perspective, thinking about agility and maybe how you've seen the role of a sales leader evolve over the past year or two.
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the first things I thought of is when I see agility, I see leaders wanting to do it their way is sort of the classic leader,
Hmm.
or maybe even old school traditionals. Like I want it the way I want it. I was successful as a rep or in the field, and this is what got me here. But as you progress to agile, being able to be open to different ways of approaching
Hmm.
it. So one of the big challenges in today's modern world is like, hey, how do I drop my agenda and serve my team's agenda to help them be more agile? And that's pretty tricky.
Yeah, and that being agile and being a sales leader today, it feels like, a lot of the pressures on a sales leader are maybe
Mhm.
different than they were a couple of years ago. I mean, one thing that springs to mind, Calvin, is just the availability and expectation of using a tech stack and the data that's coming through towards a sales leader and trying to balance everything. I mean, what have you seen in your experience of working with sales leaders and how being a sales leader today is maybe different from the past?
Yeah, it's tough. You're right. There's so much data coming at people. It's tough to figure out what data do I use. So we're finding a lot of folks getting stuck in analysis paralysis, which is kind of a
Mm.
funny phrase. And they overlook at the data or spend too much time researching and not really getting into action. So one of the big challenges is how do I know which data to look at? How much should I look at? How much time should I put there? What doesn't derail me from getting into action? And that's a big challenge.
Yeah. Speaking of action, one of the things that I know is critically important, and we've talked a lot about with some customers is, how do you put a sales team into action overall? And I think a big piece of that, like mobilizing an entire sales team, is
Yeah.
really around building a strong sales culture. That's one of the fundamentals, right? Of building and mobilizing and getting a team into action. I'm just curious your thoughts about like sales culture itself, because we get this question a lot, right? And what are some of the most
Mhm.
important aspects, in your opinion and expertise, that go into creating a really good sales culture?
Yeah, it's funny because I can go on for hours on this. One of the things about sales culture, I think that we need to spend more time recognizing people's emotion. And
Mm.
what I find, I'm out there, a lot of leaders have experience, have been around, they've gone through the trenches, and they go, I don't want to get on this touchy feely stuff. But it's like, right. But the truth is, emotional intelligence, which is an important phrase, I'm leaning more into like a psychological safety space
Mm.
that really sets up a good culture. Meaning, when you're a leader, are you rewarding or are you punishing your people for what they say and do? And it
Mm.
happens so quick. So if you're a leader and you're not rewarding, they go, this is too much data, or how do I do a work-life balance? And oh my gosh, I'm behind on my quota. I'm on a pit. Are you actually validating, recognizing, acknowledging those spaces, or are you dismissing it and saying, get
Mm.
it done, move on, let's go, numbers to hit, quarter four, hurry up? Like, so we got to spend more time in that emotional recognition and spending time making more psychologically safe environments. That really fosters a strong culture.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Calvin, too, because especially, I know a lot of sales organizations were remote, years ago, but there's more today, right? And
Hmm.
this idea of building a safe place, and I don't know, the word that comes to mind for me is trust, right? And
Yeah.
being able to trust your team and leaders. I mean, that's tough, right? You still have a number to hit.
Yeah.
But do you talk about that with leaders and with sales professionals, this concept of trust?
Absolutely. There's some really great work by a professor out of Harvard. I forget her name right now. But she talks about how when you're doing trust, you really, as a leader, watch for, are you showcasing empathy? Are you doing good logic? Are you allowing for authenticity?
Mm,
So, as a leader, are you giving your people space to be their authentic self? Or are you forcing them to fit a round peg into a square hole? Also, do you recognize how to really reflect back their thoughts and feelings, or are you just smashing over it and not really paying attention to what's going on for them? Or is your logic off? Or so if any of those three are out, it really disrupts trust. So as a leader, can you focus on building up authenticity, empathy, and logic to help foster trust on your team? Yeah.
yeah. And that concept, I would imagine, if you're able to build trust, pay attention to those things. That's actually what's going to help you drive change when you need to do it, right? If you're a sales leader who needs to drive some transformational change, however you're doing that, you need to be able to rely on that trust to sort of get that change through, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you need that. It's a funny thing is I used to play a lot of sports as a kid, and there's a phrase we would say, I want to run through a wall for the coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
That only happens, like people only give you that dedication when they feel that you trust them mutually. I trust the coach, I trust the player. And the same thing is true in corporate. I trust my leader, I trust my team. And when you have that, they'll find a way to help you win. They'll put in the extra hours, put in the extra effort if they feel that sensation of trust and belonging, for sure.
Yeah. And I know one of the pinnacles, that's a really good point, right? They'll run through a wall for you, right? If you're asking them to do
Yeah.
more, which we're always
Yeah.
asking salespeople to do more, right? Sales leaders have to
Yeah.
do that. I've never seen a target go down. So
Right. Right.
thinking about that concept then, Calvin, of trust, I know one of the ways to do that is to foster a great coaching, right, in a sales organization. So I
Yeah.
want to shift there a little bit because I know this is also an area of expertise for you. Um,
Hmm.
but it feels like coaching's changed a little bit too. We used to be in an environment maybe where there was more time for like periodic and formal sit down discussions. But, today just feels like we're all constantly disrupted and on the go. So I'm just
Yeah.
curious, you were talking a little bit about being agile. Like, how can, sales managers, sales leaders, how can they become a little bit more agile and yet balance that really important aspect of coaching? I guess, how can they be agile in being a coach to their sales professionals?
Yeah, I think with coaching now, and it's not necessarily new. I became a certified coach, geez, over almost 2 decades ago, a long time ago. It's a long
Yeah.
time ago. But the notion from as I compare athletics to coaching, there's this notion of a coach on the sideline barking out orders. And then so if I go into corporate one-on-one meeting, sit down an hour, try and hammer out some coaching ideas.
Mm,
When you start to move into sort of like corporate coaching or executive coaching type stuff, those conversations don't need to be too long as you're following fundamentals of coaching.
mm.
Meaning, rather than having to be the coach who has all the answers, you're the coach who's pulling the answers. You're pulling the excellence from the person. And so now, rather than me sitting here for 30 minutes, an hour, trying to shoot ideas at you, I'm going to hold a space in 5 minutes and pull the best out of you. And so that's this the mindset shift. It doesn't have to be a therapy on a couch session. It's just, hey, can I ask the right questions in 3 or 4 minutes to pull the best out of this person so they can be empowered to go off to do what they have to do? And if people can get that, then I think they can be more agile as a coach.
I love that idea of like pulling the excellence out. I think that's how you put it. It's such a cool way to say it because I think sometimes people think, if I'm going to ask questions in coaching, it's going to take me longer. But it sounds
Yeah.
like what you're saying is that actually the reverse can be true because you're not, just trying to throw a bunch of stuff at the wall, right? You're kind of reversing that and putting it on its head.
Yeah. Like it's funny because I've been coaching for so long and it's not meant to sound simplistic. It is pretty tough to do. I understand that. But it's when you realize I'm trying to diagnose what's going on. At Richardson, they have a strong philosophy of diagnose before you prescribe.
Hmm.
So all you're doing is speeding up your diagnosis to prescribe better. So is you're asking more specific questions, not an interrogation. And you're looking for certain clues or markers. And once you find those, usually the person you're talking to realizes it too. And they go, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way. And so that's the thing you're looking for. It's like, can I get this person to go, oh, I didn't think of that. Oh, and get them to feel motivated and empowered and inspired to go off and do what they have to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm thinking too about, if we go down kind of one level here and we think about different types of coaching scenarios. I mean, one of the most common ones, right, is these, deal pursuits. You're a sales
Mhm.
manager, you guys are under pressure, you and your sales rep. Maybe you've got a big
Yeah.
multi-million dollar deal,
Yeah.
you hope.
Mhm.
And I'm just thinking about like coaching in the field on those deals and like what's
Yeah.
important for sales managers to know in terms of nailing it, maybe the preparation or like you said, the types of questions. I don't know. How can you help sales managers
Mm.
who might be listening think about coaching in those high stress, important pursuits?
Yeah, it's funny because this is a tricky one for me because I feel like I'm kind of controversial when I talk about this because when I go around coaching on this, I get this question. So what happens now? What do we do here?
Mm.
I think, okay, I get it. I get it. You got to close the deal, right?
Yep.
But ultimately, closing the deal is out of your control. Like you can't make them say yes. So that's the first part is like recognize a part of this is outside your control. You can
Hmm.
influence the outcome, no doubt, but I can't get in their brain and make them sign the contract.
Yep.
But I can do a lot of things that influence it. So that's the first thing I'll say to folks. Like you got to focus on what you can control first.
Mm.
So that means do better prep. Your prep is 100% in your control. So you can do research on the company. Who are the key players? What's most important to them? What are their obstacles? You can do all that homework on your own. And that'll definitely put you in a better place for the deal. And I'll say to folks, if you're not over prepared, you are literally under prepared. Your
Mm.
your prep has to be so over the top it feels nauseating. Okay. And then when you get to that place, there's a spontaneity that shows up. You're able to be more free into interaction. You're able to push a little harder and ask tougher questions when you got a stronger prep going on. The other part for leaders is forgive them if they miss. You know, so if they
Yeah.
don't close the deal, it's like, hold on, we never had the deal in the first place. I've been a sales guy since I was a kid, and you always feel gutted when you lose. But the
Yeah.
truth is, you didn't have it to start with. I know you want it. You could be in a PIP. It could be your president's club. It could be so many things, a bigger bonus, whatever. But realize, hold on, if you miss, it's okay. Okay. It's the action that's more important. Your preparation, your questions, your follow through, all of those things you can control really dictate your success in that moment. If you
And
do
that's what,
those right, go ahead. Sorry,
yeah.
yes.
No, I was just going to say that's where you're encouraging managers to like focus on those behaviors and coaching to those, right? Is that sort of what I'm understanding here?
Absolutely. There's sometimes I'll teach folks this thing called the success cycle, where I'll be in a room and I'll say to sales leaders, look, actions are more important than results. And they go, how dare you? And I'll go, hold on, hold on. Yeah, I get it. We got to hit our numbers, but hold on. So I say to them, listen, if you start taking actions, what happens as you make more calls, do better homework, reach out more, leverage, network, so on. As you do those pieces, then your results go up, right? As your results go up, then your beliefs start to shift. You start saying,
Mm.
oh, it worked. I did it. Oh my gosh, make 2 more calls tomorrow. Look at this research next day. As you do that, as your beliefs go up, more of your potential gets used. You start working with your colleagues better. You start doing more homework. You start being more creative in your campaigns. And
Mm.
as you do that, that changes your actions again. And your actions go up. And then your results go up again. And then I'm in a room, people go, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And I go, but hold on a second. The opposite's also true. If
Mm.
you don't take action, then what happens? Well, no results. And if you get no results, then what happens? Your belief goes down. See, told you. No one answers the phone. No one responds to email. This is ridiculous. What's the point? And your beliefs go down. Now your potential goes down. Now you're using less of your ability, and then your actions go even lower. So it's an upward and a downward cycle.
Yeah. Like a self-fulfilling prophecy either way, right?
Absolutely. So the key piece is can you get in doing things that you can control on a consistent basis? That's the real trick to the sales game.
Yeah. I love that too, because I feel like that makes it a bit more tangible too for sales managers, maybe who feel like they're either new or not as good at coaching, or maybe they're running into walls when they're coaching and not seeing different results. Like focusing on what you said, which is the actions, the behaviors, what you want to see out of your people, and building that confidence, right? It's like success breeds success, and confidence builds confidence. So I can see how that, but you got to bring that journey back, right? It sounds like that's what you're
Yeah,
working with managers on, getting them to focus on the beginning of that journey and how it builds.
absolutely. Can you get and making it prescriptive for your team? So if
Mm,
you're on a coach, if people listening, as you're coaching someone, realizing when they finish the coaching interaction with you, do they have a set of actions they can follow through on versus a
yeah.
set of like feelings?
Mm,
So it's like, I'm going to make 5 new calls. I'm going to send 3 new emails. I don't know. I'm making those numbers up. But the point is like, can you get them into prescriptive action that follows versus like, oh, I feel motivated now. I'm excited. We can't do much with excitement.
yeah.
We can do stuff with actions, right?
Yeah. Well, you actually just made me think of another question too, Calvin, around this concept of, you use the word motivation. I mean, that is,
Yeah.
it's a big thing today. You said too, like when you lose a deal, you feel gutted, and continuing to try to stay motivated. I'm just curious, like, is there any
Mhm.
additional advice you give to sales leaders who are trying to keep their teams motivated, and sometimes what can be a tough environment out there on and an exhausting, fast-paced world of sales today?
Yeah, it's funny because people, because I'm a keynote speaker too, and so people go, "Oh, he's a motivational speaker." I'm like, "Wow, not really.
Yeah.
I'm not. Like motivation's a byproduct of what I do. So it's like I
Mm,
show you certain techniques, and from the technique, now you're motivated because you can carry out certain things.
yeah.
How's this tie back to being gutted? Well, so many times, especially in sales environments, we attach our self-worth to our accomplishment. Meaning, did I win President's Club? Am I the top rep in the field? Did I hit the sale? And if
Mm,
I don't get that sale, I'm a loser. I didn't do very good. I'm awful. I'm going to get fired. I'm on a PIP and so on. So we associate our self worth to our accomplishments. Now, the hard part is a lot of times in sales, there's a ton of rejection.
yeah.
And so all of a sudden now, when it seems like you're not going to get the deal or they're ghosting you, all of a sudden people feel not so good. It affects their self esteem, it affects their self worth and their value. So for motivation, I tell people, listen, write down everything that's good about you before you begin this deal, not something in the future, like things right now that are good. So, for example, you have the job, you have a wife, a husband, you went to university, you actually, whatever's good about you, write those things down. And what the
Yeah.
research shows is you're attaching your self worth to who you are in this moment, not to some moment in the future.
Mm,
So if you do lose the deal, who cares? Because you're still amazing at what you are right now, not because you closed some deal. And so what that does is it does build up resilience, is what the research shows. You make less mistakes and you bounce back faster if you do make mistakes because your self-worth is tied to this moment now, not some moment out in the future.
I love that. I mean, that is such good advice for salespeople, but also even for like a sales manager, right? Because yeah, salespeople get knocked around, but man, I think being a sales manager or sales leader is just one of the hardest jobs out there. The pressure is on.
Yeah.
You feel all the pressure from your sales team as well. You're expected to hit the number. It's a tough job, and I like this idea of self-worth being tied to who you are in the moment. I'm just curious if you can like expand on that a little bit more for like a sales manager. What advice would you give them?
Similar concept because like you're in the middle as a sales manager, right? So it's like
Mm,
you're leading the reps and you're talking to the leaders above you too, and trying to sort of ooh, carry the load there. So I would say the same thing applies. You got that role, so applying the connect to your worth modality really works well. The idea that I'm good in this moment still fits for a sales manager. If I was to add on, hmm, here's a funny little piece I just thought of, is like maybe it comes down to like you recognizing and writing it down verbally 3 things every day that are good about you, right?
mm,
To take the pressures off. And there's some research here that shows as you do that, just take like 5 minutes, end of the day, write down 3 great things that happened that day. And as you do that, it starts to rewire your brain. So on a brain
mm.
scan, they show new neural highways developing in your mind while you doing this. How does that tie back to a sales leader? is that when you're being pounded by leaders or by your team and you're just being exhausted, you start to see the good in those moments. And it sort of makes it build up some resilience for you when you're under
Mm.
all that pressure. But it's a consistent practice of like, hey, what was good today? Versus what do most folks do? Oh, I didn't close that deal. I'm under pressure. Oh my God, Q4 is coming. What do I do? Oh my gosh, am I going to be here next year? Oh, we're merging. And all that
Yeah.
pressure starts to erase those good things and changes your focus. And then it leads to a debilitating situation. And that's no good.
Yeah. That idea of resilience, I think, gosh, today feels like it really is something that I bet a lot of sales managers can see a ton of value in for themselves,
Yeah.
building resilience. And then also building resilience in their sales team members. It just feels, we could spend a lot of time, like you said, talking about deals and best practices and all those things. And
Mm-hmm.
but building a team that is resilient and agile, actually, those two things kind of work together, right? Feels
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
feels like that is a pretty important mission today.
It's an interesting. I just thought of this, and I'm like, here's a great phrase. My coach says to me, he's like, "What wires together, fires together." So as you're talking, it made me think about belonging. As you mentioned, sales leaders trying to create sort of resilience in their team.
Mm,
There's some research around belongingness. And there's a funny little study that came out where people are in a room and they're actually doing a puzzle, right? And it's a really tough puzzle. And they can't figure it out. And pretty soon they just quit because it's too hard. And so what they did in the next arm of the study was they put the people in there doing this really hard puzzle. Then some random investigator walks in and goes, "Hey, you know what, Andrea? This note is from the person before you. Just want to make sure you're okay as you do the puzzle." Total stranger, no idea. But the
mm,
idea was writing a little note saying, "Hey, hope you're okay as you do this. Want to make sure you're fine." And so Andrea reads it. And what happens is when she got that note, she works 3 times as long on the puzzle as the people in the first arm.
mm.
So the point is just that little recognition, acknowledgement. Hey, you're with us. You're okay. Like making us belong makes people work harder, longer. And so it's funny. There's a great thing from Jack Welch, the CEO of GE years ago,
Mhm.
where he used to go around the office and write handwritten notes to his team.
Right.
And people would die for these notes, right? Just a
Yeah.
simple little handwritten, "Hey, hope you're doing. How was Thanksgiving?" Just a silly little note like that. And people were just would die for Jack just because of that little note, that belonging
Mm,
cue.
mm.
So as a leader, are you doing that? Are you just a quick text? Are you a quick phone call? Are you maybe doing a quick coffee or buying a shirt that says "Welcome to the team"? I don't know. Anything that can sort of drive belonging in your team really pumps up that resilience.
I love that, Calvin. I feel like, going into this podcast, I was thinking all about like how do we coach and win deals and, which listen, you and I know that stuff has to happen, right? I mean,
Yes.
there are hard things about being a sales manager or sales leader, but we don't talk enough about everything that you're touching on, which is, and it's so necessary. It's the other side of it, but
Yes.
being mindful about building a sense of belonging and resilience and trust with your team
Yeah.
so that you can weather those tough conversations, right? And those hard
Yeah.
times.
It's interesting. My old boss a long time ago, many of you probably know who he is. He would say, in sales, it's 80% psychology, 20% mechanics.
Mm,
He's like, look, when you go up to see someone, do you want to sign the contract? Anybody can say that. That is not hard, right? Do you want to buy it? The trouble is the psychology gets in the way. Oh, I don't want to seem pushy. What if I don't get it?
mm.
They're not going to call me back. Like all of that psychology stuff blocks you from doing the mechanics. So I can teach people and coach people on how to better closes, better question, better objection handling, all those things. But if your psychology's off, it doesn't matter. You're not going to push when the time comes. So it's like getting that part is so big. Okay, is that psychology part?
Yeah. And making sure that your team, they have that sort of that they're in the right mental state. They have that fortitude, that resilience, that confidence that you're building that alongside so that, when the time comes, they're in the right position and the mindset to do it. So I
Yep.
love that, Calvin. Yeah, thank you so much. Again, like I said, I think you took our podcast on a great and interesting turn, and I hope that for any sales managers or sales leaders who've been listening, they'll heed your advice and take some time to think about the side of the business that is about building that resilience and belonging and trust, and that will drive results for the team. So Calvin, thank you so much again for your time and the great insights. And for our listeners, if you'd like to connect with Calvin, you can find him on LinkedIn at Calvin. I'm going to spell his last name Strachan. And thanks to everybody, all of our listeners, for tuning in today. For more tips and best practices in sales, you can check us out on LinkedIn at Richardson Sales Performance.